Why do you think Singapore is such an important hub for crypto?
It's been pretty key because they started quite early. Even a few years ago, they were looking at the potential for central bank digital currencies. They've really been into funding blockchain technology. So it has been a place that was really attractive as a base in Asia. And it is getting a little bit more competition now. There's been some hesitancy from the regulators who especially have been nervous about, say, retail players getting defrauded by different efforts. There's been some trickiness in the way regulation has been handled. So it's sometimes caught the industry off guard. But overall, it is well respected as a regulatory framework. And so that's been very attractive to crypto.
Well, and of course, you wrote a Business Week piece about how a lot of restaurants are actually accepting cryptocurrencies as payment now. That's one way you can use a digital asset, right, as an actual form of currency. There's also stores of value and just as a trading mechanism, which is where also NFTs come into the picture. And yet that feels like it's a market going downhill pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you have the crypto prices going downhill, and that can take NFTs with them because if they're priced in, say, Ether, and lots of people have Ether just kind of hanging around to buy a Bored Ape, this is going to make the prices go downhill. But there are also lots of uses for NFTs that haven't been explored yet, so I think that's going to be the interesting thing over the next couple years. Do you have, like, wines that you can tell what their provenance is, for instance? But yes, a lot of the NFT market in general, especially the art, is kind of going downhill right now.